Welcome to this lesson. This lesson is a continuation of the topic that we started talking about in the previous lesson, which is JavaScript stuff. We've talked about the fact that scope equals to feasibility in JavaScript, which means that when you work with variable, how how do you know when they are accessible from maybe within a code block or outside a code block? That is what the purpose of feasibility is all about. So feasibilities allows you to know the scope of how variables in JavaScript behave. And in the last lesson, we talked about one of the scope that we have in JavaScript, which is the global scope, by showing us how variables can be available globally through your code. And we demonstrated that by declaring variable outside that were not inside any thing like curly braces or inside a code block, but rather they were declared freely inside our editor. And then through that, we were able to see that all those variables that were declared in that manner are available globally in our code. And it does not matter whether the variable is declared with var keyword, let, or const keyword. The three of these method of declaring variable behaves the same way when it comes to global scope in JavaScript. And today in this lesson, we are going to be talking about another aspect of JavaScript scope, which is called the function scope. Each JavaScript function have their own scope. Variable defined inside the function are not accessible physically from outside the function. So for function scope, variables used inside function are only accessible within that function. If you try to access some variable from outside the function, you are definitely going to get an error, like a reference error, due to the fact that a variable like that is not globally accessible. And this is the difference between global scope and function scope. In global scope, as we discussed in the last lesson, you will see that this type of variable are available anywhere and they can be called anywhere in your code. But for function scope, they are only limited to this function in which they are described or declared. And calling them from outside of that function is going to give an error. Variable declared within var, let, and const are quite similar when declared inside a function. So regardless of the keyword that is used in declaring your variable, as long as it is within a function, they behave similarly, which means that calling them from outside will always give an error because it will become inaccessible from outside. So this is how function scope works in JavaScript. And quickly, before I just show an example that want to show in this lesson, I quickly want to talk about local variables. So what it means by local variable in JavaScript is that when you declare a variable, that variable becomes local to the context of where you are trying to use it. For example, let's say you are trying to use it in a function. If you have a variable in the function, that variable that is declared that function becomes local to that function and it can be accessed inside that function where you are trying to use it. Local variable has function scope. They can only be accessed from within the function. Like I said, that these local variables, if you have them, now when you declare a variable inside the function, it becomes local to that function and can only be accessed from within the function. There's no script or function outside that function that can access them. Variable with the same name can be used outside the function. This is very important. If you have a context around your variable, you can use that, for example, a function, and you have a name declaration for a variable. You can use that same name in another function as long as it is outside of that particular function. But if you have a function and you are trying to use the same variable name, it will give an error. Variable with the same name can be used in different functions. Now, if you have variables that have the same name, you can use it in different functions and it will not throw an error. Local variables are created when a function starts, like I said. So when you try to declare variable inside a function, that is when that for a variable becomes local to that function. So it starts when a function starts. Local variables are deleted when a function is completed. So after a function that has been completed, whether in full to run or completed in any other way, then that local variable becomes deleted. from the function. Argument parameter work as local variable inside function. So if you have things like parameters inside your functions, they work as local variable, hearing that they are available to that function where it is being used. So let me just quickly show us an example of what the function scope means in JavaScript. So let me pull up my editor, and here I'm just going to have a function called outside like this. And then let me go ahead and make that function. Let me just give it my function as the name. And there's nothing special in what I'm doing, is something that we've done countless time, how we just can declare function, the regular function in JavaScript. So let me take this as our base. I just have a variable, and inside it I'm going to use this get element by ID split of demo inner HTML equals. So let me use this property. I want to get the type of variable that we have here. And I want to move to the next line so that I can see what I'm wanting. Then I want to put space this way and then do curly. So now this is one. So before I proceed, I quickly want to show this when the variable is inside the function and when we are trying to access, when we try to access it outside the function. So I'll call this demo one, and then I'll just change this to demo one, then make another one, another instance, and call it demo two. So the first one will be how I'm accessing it inside. So you can see that I am accessing this variable inside this function. Now let me now try to access it outside and see what we'll get. Get element by ID demo 2. Now, if you take a look at what I am getting here, so let me just change this and do demo 1 so that I can get it clearly. Yeah, you can see I'm getting the correct this thing that I have. Good. I want also be able to see it clearly, so that's why I quickly just worked on the CSS. So this is what the function scope means. You can see that here within this function, within this code block, open curly brace and close curly brace, I was able to access this variable and I declare, and you can see the type of it is the string and it is base, which is the value of it. But when trying to access this same variable outside of the function, you can see that I'm getting undefined, which means that functional scope cannot be accessed from outside the function. So this is what function scope is all about in JavaScript. Thank you, and we'll proceed in the next lesson to take a look at another scope of variables in JavaScript. Thank you, and see you in the next one.